Hey everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. Today is probably the most difficult live stream I've ever made. It's difficult because I had to wait 30 minutes for public transport, and then I had major issues with my camera not being recognized by Chrome. So the universe has been working today to prevent this live stream from happening. But nothing can happen. Nothing can stop me. I'm an unstoppable force. And today I want to talk about introverted intuition and introverted intuitives and why we are so strange. And yeah, when you read Carl Jung's own thoughts on introverted intuition, they're actually really interesting. They're posted online, so you can search for it, and you can find his books where he talks about the cognitive function. And really, what he's saying is introverted intuition is not really a deep function. He doesn't really use that word. Instead, he talks about it as a strange function. He talks about the introverted intuitive type as a complex case of study. And he sees it as a very unusual or peculiar influence on the personality and on the person. And the introverted intuition comes from the internal, the subjective, everything related to self, to identity, to our internal frame of mind, to our thoughts, but also to the abstract, to the intuitive, to our imagination, to our ideas, and towards the more complex and the more hard to define. So the more impractical it becomes, the more intuitive it becomes. The more slow it is, the more intuitive it becomes. The more in-depth it is, the more intuitive it becomes. So you are looking at something that is generally tuned away from high sensation. It's something that is that avoids the spotlight, that avoids being on stage, that avoids being seen, that avoids being described. And often I tend to describe introverted intuition as the dark room. I tend to work with this metaphor from my own frame of mind, where I tend to see my own process as kind of working in a dark room. I don't see any of the furniture in this room. I don't see how this room is composed or how it's made up or how it works. But what I'm doing is I'm kind of trying to understand it by feeling it out and navigating it. And what does this feel like? This feels like a chair. This seems like some kind of a lamp. What I'm doing is I'm kind of navigating in the dark, and I'm trying to understand these kinds of events. So yeah, as an introvert intuitive, you're drawn to the theoretical. What can you explain with theories? What can you understand from an abstract point of view? How can you explain something you don't know? So when you know it, when it's all in front of you, when it's apparent to everybody how it works, it's not interesting. It's when you don't know it, when you're speculating about it, or when you are coming up with or brainstorming options or thinking around it, that you're engaging in intuition. So it has to be complex, and it has to be abstract, and it has to be often a far-fetched possibility or something in long term or something to come. So I used it a lot to speculate on society and to understand theoretically physics, how the universe is composed, how it works. I engaged in these kinds of thoughts, and I navigated towards, I would say, more towards the strange or towards the peculiar than towards what was realistic, towards what was obvious, or towards what was more feasible or more practical or more easy to study by direct investigation. So often what I say is on a theoretical basis. And often it is that I struggle to go from theory to a deeper understanding. My extroverted intuition is not strong enough. And what this means is I'm good at formulating a hypothesis about how something works, but I'm not that good at putting this hypothesis to practice, testing it on people, formulating some kind of idea about how it works or how it should work, and then going out and then testing it and then seeing if it works and then asking questions and then getting the feedback. It's not that digging process. I'm not the digging journalist. I'm not the detective. I'm not going and following clues and patterns and seeing what patterns exist and where they lead and what they mean. I am coming from the perspective of the philosopher. So what I'm doing is I'm questioning something and I'm going, how could it work? What could it be? What might it be? So when you're in this mental frame of mind, often what's very important to the introvert intuitive is the inner world. The inner world is really important to the introvert intuitive. Originality is very important to the introvert intuitive. The surface explanation, when you're sitting and listening to a teacher and they're telling you how it works and they're laying it out for you and they say, this is how history works, this is how nature works, this is how science works. That doesn't really work well with me. It doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't resonate with me because I find myself wanting to question everything, and I want to find out for myself and I want to come up with my own explanation. So what I did when I studied history was I read what the textbook said about the Vikings or so on, and then I ended up theorizing and I'm thinking, what might that have been? What could that have been? What might the Vikings have been up to? Why did they believe in this? So my interest in everything is predominantly philosophical. Why everything? Why was the medieval ages? What really happened? I doubted everything I read, and I didn't know for sure if I could trust the school books or what they said. And what I ended up doing when I got my exam handed to me was I filled in my own original explanation of what I thought, what I theoretically thought was the case regarding these lessons. And of course, that's graded at an F or barely a D. Often my teachers would give me a sympathetic C saying, this was interesting, but it's not what the school book said. So often what they told me was, you need to be better at regurgitating what the school book says. Repeat back to me, this is the knowledge, what it says in the book, that's what you got to know, that's what you got to say on the test. So that's what people kept cramming into me. I was not allowed to be original or to have my own thoughts or my own opinions, or I was allowed to, but I was not allowed to express them or articulate them in school or in my work. So it was something I had to keep to myself. And I was, of course, very disappointed when I went into philosophy thinking, oh, finally a class where I can think for myself. And then I heard even there, what I had to do was just study up on philosophers and repeat what they had said. I had no freedom to give my own thoughts or my own views. As an introverted intuitive, you tend to feel like, yeah, I'm living in my own inner world and I have my own thoughts, my own state of mind. But I'm not allowed freedom to express myself, to share my own thoughts. And you feel like freedom is something that you have to be allowed and you have to be given freedom. The most difficult thing about introverted intuition is you feel like you have to be given freedom. You have to be encouraged to be free. People have to tell you actively to share your mind. People have to actually invite you to do it. And when you do share your own thoughts, you have to feel like people are resonating with what you say and that people accept it and that they understand it. Otherwise, you keep it to yourself. If you feel like people don't care or that they're not going to listen or that they're not going to understand, you're going to keep it to yourself. And that's what I did for the most of my youth. I kept my inner world to myself. I was private, secretive even. I did not share much with anybody. Perhaps a select few I met through social medias or online that I felt I could trust. For the most, I kept my inner world to myself. What I had with other people at school and with my teachers, that was something very surfacey. I got along with everybody. And I appeared to everybody like a normal person. But it was really completely one-sided because I was only sharing what I thought I was allowed to share. I was only expressing what I thought I was allowed to say. And everything else just kept on happening inside. So of course, what I ended up needing was a lot of alone time. I would retreat to my own world, to my own thoughts, to my own head whenever I had the chance. And that for me meant recharging and filling up my batteries and getting centered, being around other people and being in their world and their life and talking about things that interested them. It made me happy because I made them happy by being that way, but it also made me feel depressed and it made me feel bored. So I struggle with boredom a lot with other people and in my day-to-day experiences. It was not really help because my parents were also not very encouraging in that aspect. My dad would say that there's no point, Erik, in sharing anything with anybody because nobody will ever understand. That's tipped up parent advice, but it was really as for him. He had experienced a lot of rejection himself regarding this, so he was also very insecure about this. And he was also talking about how nobody at work understood him and nobody was at his level, and everybody was just talking about boring shit, and nobody was talking about anything that interested him. So he had the same issue I did, and he grew up with that as well. And feeling misunderstood then is pretty natural for introverted intuitives. It's that my ideas were often dismissed, and I was called boring, and I heard I heard that nobody cared about what I thought, and people would say, "Erik, nobody's interested in this bullshit," and it was that level of rejection constantly, where people told me I couldn't be myself, and I couldn't have my own hobbies, and I couldn't do that, and if I did that, I had to do it away from other people. So I ended up 6 days out of 7 spending time by myself reading books that I would never talk about with anybody. And then 1 day out of 7, I got my social need was high enough. So I had to go out and talk to people. But once again, when I talked with people, it was never what I thought. It was always what they were interested in. So that's the struggle. And, introvert intuitives were always cold strange. Like, I had people tell me I was strange so many times. I was called weird and odd, and I was perceived to be whenever I did something that was original, whenever I had my own thoughts or said something that I was thinking up, or whenever I was coming up with something that was my own, people would always dismiss it so easily. And it's hard to explain why it was dismissed or what it came from. But sometimes I think it also came from other introverted intuitives. Oddly enough, I think it came from people that were rejecting me for what they were rejecting themselves for. And this is a hard thing to accomplish because a lot of us are in hiding or keeping our own worlds to ourselves. I've had a lot of people open up to me that for the most, until they hit 30, they were only presenting an outer shell. They never shared any of their thoughts, and they had a lot of interest. In deep down, they admitted, I have a lot of personal interest. I want to be a writer. I want to do something to the world. I want to go deeper. I want to understand something that nobody else ever understood, and I want to be understood for my intellect. But they would admit to me that they couldn't speak out or share these things out of a fear of being called odd. That fear of being weird or being called weird, I think, is very introverted intuitive fear, and it comes from the grounding extroverted sensing, because extroverted sensing, that's so normal. It's the most normal cognitive function of them all. It's associated with going with the flow, with being around the crowd, and with being and taking on the mood and energy of the people around you, and feeling out your environment, and feeling the air and feeling the sun and feeling everything hit against you, and just being in that zone. Where introverted intuition is associated with having your own inner world, your own state of mind, your own experiences, your own thoughts that nobody has ever heard before, that nobody has ever thought before, that are completely yours. And because they're also so silent, they're also so easy to hide. This is a very easy to hide function. It's easy to hide because when you say them, when you start talking about them, at first people don't understand, or they misunderstand, or they start with something surfacey to understand it. They begin with like you start thinking about something, you start trying to talk about it with somebody, and they start trying to relate to it, but they start trying to relate to it by trying to push it into something basic. They start making it about something very simple. And that just also makes it more difficult because you feel you have to start with the most basic. Every time I had to explain something to somebody, I had to start really, really basic. And to the point where you felt, oh, I've heard this a million times. One of the most frustrating things for me is saying the same thing more than once, and really having to repeat yourself and having to slow down and to think like the other person thinks and to focus on the more basic aspects. I want to talk about things I don't understand. 90% of the videos I make on YouTube are about things I don't yet quite understand. And I don't think anybody else does either. And that's perhaps the most encouraging part of it. Sure, I might not be qualified to talk about it, but neither is anybody else because nobody else has ever thought about this either. I and every one of you who is watching, we are all together in this dark room and in this place, this uncharted territory. It feels like we're explorers, that we are on a new continent. We're talking about new countries, new indigenous people, new tribes, new environments, new houses, new architecture. Everything is new. So yes, we're in a dank room, and we're the first people to be orienting this room and be thinking about this in that way. And that's the most encouraging thing about originality. To me, that is my biggest kick of energy, to find an explanation, an insight that explains something that I never knew before and that nobody else knew before either. To come up with a new way to solve a problem, to come up with a new explanation for something, to come up with a new idea about something. That level of originality is very, very important to me. It's important because it speaks to that philosopher archetype within myself. It's such an integral part of who I am. It's such a part of what I am and what I do and what I pride myself on doing. It's interested when I can feel curious. It speaks to all those like positive emotions, and it feels like a high. It feels like freedom. It feels like being at peace. It feels like being myself. It feels easy and effortless. Being somebody else, just going with and doing what everybody else does, that takes active force. Have you tried to stop yourself from pursuing your interest? That's really hard for me. It's very hard for me to stop thinking about something once I've started thinking about something. When I get into that mental state, I'm only thinking about that over and over. I'm just going over that. And it's hard for me to get out of that and snap out of it and go back to reality. Once again, I'm quoting Eminem. It's hard to snap back to reality because that image is burned into my mind. It's 90% of my mental capacity. It is all my neurons, all my happy neurons, all my curiosity. Everything is just tugging me to think about it and to engage in it. And it can appear perhaps a little bit obsessive at times, but it also feels so liberating to engage in it and to just be in that. It feels great to be in flow, to swim with the current rather than against it. And it feels very hard to force yourself to think about practical matters and to think about work and to just go with the flow and to just be out when this is happening. It's actually like a very uncomfortable experience because it can feel really agitating. Like on the inside, it can feel like like it's stinge. It's like a stinge on my inside me. Like it's really an itch. I have an itch to create, but I also have an itch to think and to theorize and to contemplate. So I'm gonna start rounding up this stream, but Susu says philosophy class was hell for her as well. Princess, it was very hard to put your own ad as your source. It was easier to just fake citing Wikipedia than doing that. Yeah, it's also hard for me to source my own thoughts. You can't source your own thoughts. But if you can source a philosopher that has said what you thought, then it's accepted. Then it's okay. Fairy says she had to camouflage her mental health issues by doing everything people expected me to do. Never talking to many people, though. More isolated. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the worst part about it. You're hiding everything. So when I eventually did share my experiences with other people, they were like, "But Erik, you seem so normal." I would keep everything to myself, and when I eventually did share, people would say, "But you're just like everybody else." But you're not at all. No, that's not true at all. You're not like that. You're not dealing with this. You're not having these thoughts. So it would really get to the point where you start doubting your own mind, like am I crazy? Did I just imagine that I thought this, that I was experiencing this because everybody else thinks I'm so normal? That camouflage can really bite you in the ass, because nobody who is genuinely interested in the same things you are will accept you or will notice you. Everybody around you will think you are the normal person you pretend to be. Everybody will think you are the camouflage that you project outwards. And that's perhaps gaslighting in a sense, because then people are really putting you down, and they're really going like, you should not feel that way, and you shouldn't think that way, and what you're thinking is not right. What I think about what you're thinking, that's what's right. Fairy has a few chosen people she shares her inner world with, and I think that's very healthy. Ideally, of course, everybody will understand, and with time perhaps it will get easier, and we will get better at understanding it and accepting it and actually realizing it's a superpower just like everything else. We INs, I always win hide and seek. I think I used to win hide and seek quite a lot, actually, because I would always hide right in the open where nobody ever thought to watch because it was so stupid. And yeah, I was always there and I always won. Barry says, I have a hard time staying in the present moment, often as an INTJ 5 wing 4. Yeah, it's really hard to stay in the present. That's what I was struggling with. Just you have the present and you have reality tugging at you because you know you should be thinking about it, but then you want to be thinking about your own subjective ideas and your own personal theories because, yeah. And Barry also says, I wish I could be more spontaneous. And yeah, that's it. We introverted intuitives, we're dreaming of being more free and more adventurous than we are. We're not dreaming of becoming extroverted sensors. That's not it. We're dreaming of being grand investigators, of going out into the world, solving mysteries, connecting dots, figuring out puzzles, seeing new continents, going to new planets. Or we're dreaming about those things. So it's still intuition. It's just extrovert intuition. And that's a really hard function to engage in. Introvert intuitives, we tend to just pull between two functions, introverted intuition or extroverted sensing. So either what we're doing is we're in our own world, in our own heads, or we are forcing ourselves to accept reality and to go with the flow and do what everybody does and to be in the present moment. But what we really should be doing is we should be learning and developing a relationship with the world of opportunities and freedom and change and possibilities. We should be developing a relationship with our inspiring functions, extroverted intuition, for example, then, because that's where energy and firewood and fuel is for the introvert intuitive process. As soon as you connect those dots, what you get also is a theoretical framework to start building on. So that's what health and development is. But what you need often to engage in this process is encouragement, active encouragement. It's so easy to get discouraged. You say something, you speak your mind, you express a theory, and people start testing it and they start saying it's stupid and it's not going to work and it's unrealistic and you're an idiot for thinking this way, and you should just do what everybody else does. You start becoming misunderstood, and people start misinterpreting what you said, and they start focusing on the surface explanation of what you did. You have to get past all that and all those fears of being judged for that, and you have to press on, and you have to find that flow of remaining comfortable and trusting in your theories and trusting in them enough to go out and put them forward and to test them, and to start asking questions and to start investigating and turning things upside down and seeing what happens. Because only then will you get the firewood, the fuel necessary to truly understand the world, and to create a functional framework of theories and abstractions and generalizations that can actually be used to solve puzzles, to explore hidden new continents, and to find out new things. Introverted intuition, to be strange can be a strength when it comes to finding other INs. And ENs, of course, extrovert intuitives as well. ENTJs are only group with strong NI that can operate really well on a practical level in the world. Let me settle something. Everything I've said in this video, 90% of what I've said in this video can also be said about INTPs and INFPs. They are introverted intuitive masterminds. They're secret introverted intuitive masterminds, just as INFJs and INTJs. They are really underrated for their introverted intuition. Often when you start talking with them and start digging, what you'll find is they struggle with the exact same things. It's true for them as well. So what we're going to have to start accepting is, just like Carl Jung believed, people have two introverted functions in their top. Extroverted functions are predominantly used by extroverts. Introverted functions are predominantly used by introverts. Carl Jung believed the top two functions were introverted. And he has good reason to believe that, because when introverts go into extroversion, that's actually very difficult, very hard. It takes a lot of effort and energy. So that's perhaps why INFPs and INTPs are also very good at it, also very good at introverted intuition, because their introverted state of mind, their subjective state of mind, their introverted thinking, their introverted feeling, it pairs so well with introverted intuition. So yeah, we all suck, apparently. We're all strange, we're all weirdos, INFPs and INFJs alike. We're a lot more similar than people think. We have our differences, but the world is hard. But if you find people that are more like you and you start really following what you want, I believe everyone can make their life satisfactory. Yeah, what Iris says is true. You have to make your dreams come true, and there might be some difficulties to that, bringing your ideas into reality, making your dreams happen, proving your theories, testing out your ideas. But it's the most rewarding experience. It has been the most rewarding for me. Thank you all for joining in on today's live stream, and I hope to see you all in tomorrow's video that will also start at 16 GMT plus 1, about 1 hour earlier, 2 hours from now, earlier than today. So thank you all for joining up, and I hope to see you all in the next live stream.